second race weekend of the BMW IBSF Bobsleigh and Skeleton World Cup was in Winterberg in Germany, and Friday was Skeleton Day. Disappointing first heat for Germany's Axel Jung. He was shaking his head after a really loose first run, but the second was absolutely top draw stuff from Germany's #1 slider, aiming for the medals and a great run to put him in contention. Fourth after the first heat was Thomas Ducurs of Latvia. He and brother Martins have had a number of 1-2 results here over the years. Martins with 8 gold medals in a row alone. But Ducurs couldn't hold back the resurgent Jung, and he dropped back as Axel led with 3 to go. Third after the first heat was the World Cup points leader. Nikita Tregobov won last week out in Sigulda, and with the yellow jersey resting on his shoulders, looked as though he had a medal shot as well. But mistakes early on cost him. He'd never catch up the time he'd lost to Axel Jung, and as a result, the Russian too failed in his shot to hold back the German. Jung thrilled to be on the podium for the first time. Sungbin Jung, the Olympic champion, second after the first heat, but 44 hundredths off the runaway leader. Could he hold back Axel Jung? He started behind, but then came on strong, into the green, down the fast part of the track, and across the line. Somehow Jung had found more speed than the Korean, and by a whisker, he still led. But there was to be no denying a man whose previous victory on this track came 12 seasons earlier. Alexander Tretyakov had been absolutely scintillating in the first heat, and with 2 fastest starts and 2 crushingly fast runs, he ran away to victory by a massive margin. A phenomenal victory for the Russian, with Axel Jung taking second and the Olympic champion Sungbin Jung in third. And that means we have a tight leaderboard as we head into the Christmas break. And with Altenberg next up, it's anybody's season still. Alexander Tretyakov and Nikita Tregobov lead the standings. Second event on Friday was the women's skeleton competition, and in a packed field, Canada's Mimi Reniva lay in 6th position after the first heat. She was just 4 hundredths out of the top 5 and only 2 tenths away from the podium. A great slide from the Canadian put her into the leader's box, where she would still remain after teammate Elizabeth Meyer had her run. Next up, Janine Flock of Austria, her first World Cup race of the season, as she didn't go to Sigulda. Had she lost any of her edge post-Olympics? No, she certainly hadn't. Her firm, disciplined style on this track really pays dividends, and Janine spears into the lead. She'd only been 100th of a second off Tina Hermann, who was third after the first heat. Germany were looking for a podium finish from one of their girls, and as Hermann dropped behind Janine Flock, it seemed maybe she would not be the one to give them that position. But down at the bottom is where she fares best, and out of the finish corner, she had crept back in front. 2 to go. Next up, 100th quicker than Hermann in the first heat, Elena Nikitina of Russia. Again, like Nikita Tregobov, her teammate, a winner in Sigulda, and so the yellow vest on her shoulders. But like her teammate, she also failed to perform to the top standard here in Winterberg and dropped back. Last to go was the hometown queen, Jacqueline Lurling, the double World Cup champion for the last 2 seasons. This is her home track and where she fares best. 34 hundredths in front from the first heat. She had no problems, almost doubling that to claim victory ahead of her teammate Tina Hermann. Germany with a 1-2 result, and Janine Flock on the podium, 100th ahead of Elena Nikitina of Russia. So Jacqueline Lurling claiming home victory. Tina Hermann lies second in the points, but it is still Nikitina who heads the World Cup rankings into the Christmas break. Saturday morning and the women's bobsleigh race at Winterberg. Nadezhda Sergeyeva lying in a strong 5th position, looking to try and equal her career best in the women's bob. Good second run down the Winterberg track would put her into lead over Kathi Beil of Austria, who herself was happy with a top 6 finish. Next up, the first of 3 Germans in the top 4, youngster Anna Köhler. Could she stay in front of the Russian? Halfway down, it looked certain. But gaps at Winterberg are never big. A 10th of a second into the Kreisel, was it enough? At the line, the gap had shrunk to almost nothing, but she managed to find 12 hundredths at the line. Third after the first of the two heats was America's Alana Myers-Taylor. Lake Quasar making her first ever World Cup starts on the back of the sled. Myers-Taylor put together a smoking run, enjoying Winterberg much more than the rough, tough and busy Sigulda a week earlier, and 72 hundredths clear of Curler, guaranteeing herself a podium finish. But was it enough for gold? Two German sleds remained. Last year's winner Stephanie Schneider was in second position by just a whisker after the first heat, but she had enough in hand at the bottom of the track, despite a couple of errors, to ease away from Alana Myers-Taylor and guarantee herself a shot at gold. Between her and the gold medal in the first heat had been Olympic champion Mariama Yamanka, fresh off her first ever World Cup win, and with the great starting performance behind her, could she claim victory for the second straight week? Halfway down, the answer was yes, but on the fastest part of the tracks, mistake crept in, and incredibly, she dropped 700ths behind Stephanie Schneider, last year's winner, with Anne Kristenstrack behind her, claiming gold, the Olympic champion in silver, and Alana Myers-Taylor with rookie Lake Quasar finishing in third. A strong season so far from Germany, with Yamanka and Kohler bracketing Sergeva at the top of the points. Saturday evening, and the first of two four-man races in Winterberg on a clear, crisp night. The ice was fast, very fast indeed, under Russia's Maxim Anjanov. Top five after the first heat, and the gaps were absolutely tiny. Between him and Benny Meyer, there was no gap at all. So first of all, he had to beat the Austrian to try and aim towards the medals. He succeeded in doing that, but the next buffer might be more significant. Bavaria's Johannes Lochner, the reigning four-man champion, won last year's race. Would he do it again? Well, the first thing was to dispose of Maxim Anjanov and his crew, and that he did, but he'd been nearly a quarter a second off the lead, and 800ths behind Latvian's Oskars Kibamanis. So could the Latvian break up a German clean sweep of the podium? Early on, it didn't look promising as he dropped 500ths of a second behind with a skid in the first couple of corners. And he never recovered his composure. Lochner was in the medals with two German sleds to go. First of whom, the Olympic and world four-man champion Francesco Friedrich. Friedrich had been just 200ths of a second off the lead, and that was his entire focus. But it was an uncharacteristically loose run, and his second heat put him in front of Lochner. Would it be enough? He hadn't even maintained his first heat advantage, and that perhaps allowed a glimmer of daylight for Nico Walter. The man who prefers four-man was in his Olympic silver medal winning sled. But with the Olympic champion breathing down your neck, nothing is a given. Walter had to give of his very best, and he did, claiming victory by 700ths of a second in the first World Cup four-man race of the year. Germany swept the podium, the last 3 years' winners on this track in the top three: Walter, Friedrich and Lochner. And that's how they were in the World Cup standings, with another race to go. A snowy Sunday in Winterberg for the second four-man race of the season. Russia's Alexander Bridikin had had a great run from 9th place to lead as Latvia's Oskars Kibamanis came to the line. Third after the first run on Saturday, Kibamanis had slipped out to 4th. He'd been in 6th position after the first heat on Sunday, but put together a really nice second run, not just to knock back the Russian, but also to try and move up towards the medals. Directly in his path, though, was the previous day's winner, Nico Walter. Walter had only been 5th after the first heat, but just 1500ths off gold and 500ths quicker than Oskars Kibamanis. Dropping briefly into the red, they still speared ahead of the Latvian. Maxim Anjanov of Russia, who'd been close to the medals on day one, slipped out of contention, and so it was down to Benny Meyer in 3rd place after heat 1, but a starting mishap would cost them a chance of a medal. They'd lost all their early speed, and from there on it was a painful run for Meyer, losing ground to Walter all the way down, Nico and his crew in the medals, and Benny not able to repeat the bronze medal of a couple of years ago. Germany led with 2 to go. On Saturday, Johannes Lochner overturned a 200s deficit to go from 4th to 3rd. He started the final run just 200s adrift of the leader. Could he do it again? Well, first he had to beat Nico Walter, which he accomplished, and then he had to wait a couple of minutes to see what the Olympic champion could do. Like his fellow Olympic champion for Germany, Mariama Yamanka, it had been silver medal Saturday for Francesco Frugic, and a loose first run looked like that might continue. But an absolutely clinically precise second heat put him not a couple of hundreds, but over 3/10 clear, a crushing victory, another German clean sweep, and this time the Olympic champion taking his first win of the season with his Olympic four-man crew. Lochner and Walter again in the medals, and it's the Germans who head the points as we head to the Christmas break.